But I think that here's an interesting thing I've heard from a bunch of different sources. People giving their impressions about the watch, and one of the interesting things that I think is that everybody agrees that Apple's done a fairly decent job, but it's not like that. Nobody feels like it's the final version. Nobody feels like it was like the iPhone came out and it just totally revolutionized the category of devices. So I think there's lots of room. There's lots of room for improvement, and it's a brand new style of communication because it is so personal and because it is such a small form factor. And I think we're all going to have to learn the best practices, the best way to do it. And I don't think anybody has a handle on that, not even Apple.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to say something about this discussion here because I was a little bit confused about. Okay, so Matt, you were saying that you want to be able to push notifications to the device to communicate with it, but not necessarily to use Corona to display things on the device. Am I hearing you correctly?
Well, I was saying that by default, an application that does pushes, right, will automatically get a push to the watch, but it displays it in a very generic way. In order to get a customized response to the watch, you have to build a watch interface from WatchKit, so that when you're actually pushing it from, say, the app, right, and it's doing two things. Like on the phone, it's getting the push notification or whatever the local notification is, and then it tells the connector through a segue saying, okay, watch, I want you to display this, but that display is built just for the watch, and you give it a button you want to respond to or what have you. But if you don't do that, it's just very basic. Like iMessage is going to look very awesome because Apple did all the work for that, and so is Twitter with their native watch app that's I guess out now. But everybody else is going to have like something very generic until they release a change. And I have some stuff that looks good on the phone, and I'd like to have the same screen look good over on the watch for the 5 of you that have them. But that's.
Well,
I'll be getting mine soon somehow. I don't know how.
Well, what you're really looking for then is some easier way to get better.
Well, if you don't actually make a view controller specific for the watch sizes, then it doesn't consider it a watch app. It just sends the normal notification, and you're not going to get that special clarification in the store that your app is watch enabled or whatever.
Well, there's two things there. One is being classified as having an app extension or an Apple Watch app, and then the other thing that I think that I hear you talking about is this idea of customizing
Right.
the experience. Whereas you can in any system, even in Apple's standard widgets, you can have a stock uncustomized look, or you can have a very highly customized look. And I've seen some Apple Watch games already that have you can tell they're using a button, a widget, and then they're going in and they're just adding an image to that, and then they're taking and they're sort of hacking together a game. And then I've seen some where they clearly have created graphics that are sized just for that device, and they've made it a completely custom looking experience where it's like, that's a nice looking game, so but they put a lot of effort into it.
I got a question here for the panel. Now we've got the Apple Watch, but we've also got Android watches out there, right? Am I wrong? I thought somebody in the community wrote a Corona app and loaded it up to a Android watch. Is that true?
Yeah, that was Rob Allison. Mm-hmm. I think either he or a friend of his used Corona to build an Android watch app.
I'm just asking this question because the Apple Watch doesn't work in the same way, in the sense that we can't hope. I think this is what Sergey was really saying earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sergey, but basically the Apple Watch doesn't have the juice or the horsepower to run Corona directly on the device.
That's right.
Yeah, well, and even as I understand it, Apple I fully expect maybe in June that they would announce some additional features for the watch. For the developers, for the SDK. But yeah, right now everything seems to be very much driven by the phone, and then you have stuff that's pushed to the watch. So really, there's no. They don't want you to load a whole bunch of stuff onto the watch, and it doesn't really seem to have the horsepower.
They've offloaded all the heavy lifting to your phone.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a balance there, because I've seen some games. Like I have one game on my watch that is a stacking game, and I think it's called Stack Them or something like that. And it has a grid pattern, and you have a red dot that moves across the screen, and when you hit the button, it stops that dot on that grid square, and then the next row begins lights up and starts moving, and then you have to hit that and then try to stack those dots up. I've noticed that there is a fraction of a second delay between the time when I hit the button and when the dot actually stops moving. So there's times when I actually have to hit the stop button before the dot gets to the grid coordinate in order to make sure that it lines up properly. And I don't know if that's because of the way that the developer just coded it, if they offloaded everything to the phone and there's a communication delay between the two devices, or what. Because I have seen other games where you're tapping on the screen in order to attack a character, and you don't get you don't notice it the same way. And I think maybe it's just because one is very dependent on motion and the other one maybe not so much.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but it's all kind of everything I've seen so far is definitely on the phone. Like even some of the apps, some of the games that I've loaded up on the watch, it says, "Oh, there's not an existing session or not an existing game in play. Start one on your phone." So you actually have to pull the phone out. You start the game, put the phone back in your pocket, and then you can go back to the watch and play the game. But that doesn't make any sense, right? That's kind of like, well, I don't want to pull the phone out of my pocket. So
that's why I got the watch.
Right. So I think there's either one or two things there. It's either hardware. The hardware's not going to be able to do that ever. Like we're going to have to wait until the next version before it can do that. Or Apple is going to have to unlock some of these capabilities to the developer, and then we'll be able to truly do it as truly use
the API is still relatively locked down and rudimentary. They're probably still working out the best optimal usage of some of their features, and they're probably trying to preserve battery life first so that they don't get a black eye about that. Yeah. One thing I thought while you were saying that is it's funny how every time we get a new device, the early adopters like yourself will get it and they'll be like, "Yeah, this is awesome," and they play with it and they're like, but if you took a step back and you said, "Okay, take that game that you're playing, now put it back on your phone." If it was on your phone, you'd be like, "This game sucks. It's so slow."
Right. Yeah, there's a couple of them that I've downloaded. I wouldn't even have downloaded them on my phone to begin with. But it's just because it's on the Apple Watch. I wanted to see what they were doing, and I was like, "Oh, right. Oh, cool. That's interesting."
Kind of rolls back the how do I say it? Judgment. You're like, it's all cool. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it works on my watch, it's good.
Right. But I think that's like anything else, right? There's going to be the one-hit wonders, and then eventually, once the marketplace becomes crowded or the audience becomes more sophisticated in what they expect, then eventually it's going to be like, well, those. Remember when we used to have that dot that went across the screen?
Like Paul.
Yeah. I mean, it's
2 weeks while that was acceptable, but not anymore.
Not anymore. Right. So
in my opinion, I think we're going to see a much faster curve for the watch than we did for the phone and the iPad, and in how sophisticated the apps become. Because really, the watch is just an extension of the phone.
Right.
So I think that already, the expectation is that for the majority of apps that it's going to be connecting to the cloud, and I'm going to be able to do Facebook shares to it and tweet or Instagram or whatever the case might be. For the watch curve. I think we're going to see that what took 6 years for the phone, 5-6 years before we really started seeing that happen. I think that curve is going to be much shorter for the watch. We've got that
20% of that time.
Yeah,
I tell you what. I tell you what you can expect to see, and that is a rise in the number of LASIK procedures. because there's times when I'm like, you're like looking, you're like doing this number, it's a fairly decent sized display. It's clear, all that kind of stuff like that. But there's times, as someone whose eyes are getting to that point, one of the very first things I said to myself was, well, I guess it's time to get LASIK. So I can imagine that would actually be an issue for some people.